This is Gerardo Del Real along with my co-host, back to the superlatives, the insightful, the well-versed, the responsible, the voice of reason, Outsider Club founder, editor, writer, husband, friend, Mr. Nick Hodge, and this is episode 9 of Bizarro World. Nick, how are you? Enough superlatives there?
No, we're back in love. You make me blush.
Ah, how sweet, how sweet. There's a lot going on. The ECB is boxed in. President Mario Draghi is striking the only tone that he can strike, a dovish one. I think it sets the table pretty well for gold and the markets for the rest of the year. We'll get into that. There's a hilarious petition to sell Montana to Canada. I'd love your take on that. I know you have acquaintances in Montana. I thought that was hilarious. I want to talk about the opioid crisis and contrast that with the other national emergency, which is the wall, right? There was a really good video floating around by none other than AOC, again, striking contrast and priorities there. And Cleopatra would have looked just like Britney Spears, sparking fake outrage. So lots to get to. Let's start with the markets. Nick, what are you seeing out there?
Well, it was a busy week late last week with news and heading into PDAC, and you and I talked about heading towards 1350 last week and how it had sort of gotten there too quickly. And unbeknownst to us, while we were actually recording the podcast last week, the bottom was sort of falling out of gold a little bit, went down to about 1285. So falling back through that $1,300 floor and has since regained a bit of space. I think that was a bit of healthy profit taking, as you and I had both written. And I had also written that I compared the gold price to sort of the parable of the three pigs. And I said that if 1300 was the first house made of straw, then the next house made out of sticks had to be 1350. But watch out, because the 1350 house is obviously built more durably than the straw house at 1300. And sure enough, it got smacked right back down, back below 1300, as I said. And so we'll see. I'd like to see a more gradual approach on the next try to take down that stick house. And hopefully, because of some of the things that you mentioned with Europe and the Fed having to strike a dovish tone, we can get back to it.
You know, the Eurozone saw its economy have the lowest pace of growth in 4 years during the final 3 months of 2018. It also slashed its growth forecast for 2019 to just 1.1%. That's 0.6% less than the forecast they made just in December. So Draghi coming out and saying that interest rates are going to remain at record lows at least until December. I don't know why anybody that's paying attention to what's going on over there was surprised. Apparently, you know, a lot of economists and brilliant analysts were taken by surprise by that announcement. The dollar ended the week higher. And for me, it's a pretty clear trajectory what's going to happen the remainder of the year. And if you bear with me for a minute, let me lay it out. The ECB is trapped. The bond market, it's the only bid. There is no one else bidding for European bonds, meaning rates cannot rise without a bond blow up overseas. So they will play along as long as they can. And the really interesting thing to me is that even Draghi acknowledged the fact that this really isn't going to help. It's just kicking the can down the road. Here's his quote from the decision. He says, "We are aware that our decisions, new stimulus, certainly increase the resilience of the Eurozone economy, but actually, can they address these factors that are weighing on the Eurozone economy in the rest of the world? They cannot." So my question is, what's the point? One, the follow-up to that is, the point is they will kick the can as long as they can. I think that you're going to see one last run into the dollar. We said last week, as gold was getting hit, unbeknownst to us, that in order for gold's rally to be sustainable and to break that critical $1,400 level that everybody wants to see, it was going to have to do it alongside a rising dollar and rising U.S. indices. This decision by the ECB, I believe, is going to send a lot of capital into the U.S. dollar. I believe the writing's in the wall. I think the end of 2019 will see a U.S. Fed that not only doesn't hike, but actually cuts again. And I think the second half, towards the end of the second half, gold is going to get on a run that finally breaks through 1,400 and makes it sustainable. And I think we're off to the races. I do think we get one last pullback. I do think that it's not time yet because the dollar is going to have a good 4 to 6 month run. But when it hits the fan out there, the institutional money is going to come into gold. I guarantee it. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with money coming back into the U.S. I agree that U.S. stocks are going to go back up. I think they had a nice, call it 20% correction heading almost to the tippy toe of bear market territory, starting in late December, and then really ripping back from that, and now sort of leveling out. I use the S&P as a barometer at around 2,750 or 2,800, but there's been some softness lately, and if you compare that softness with the softness we saw in December and the dovish pivot, as Bloomberg has called it, of the Fed chairman, then I think, yes, the Fed has to keep rates low. I don't know about negative rates, but I do think that, excuse me, U.S. stocks go back to highs. I agree with you. What I don't understand, and maybe you have a better grasp or would like to provide some insight on, is what is that catalyst in 4 to 6 months or whatever it may be that finally ends the game of kick the can, because, man, it's been over a decade-long game.
And in Japan, frankly, it's been an over, 3-decade-long game. If I had to point to one thing, and again, everybody has a crystal ball and an opinion, but it's the extremely leveraged overweight position of the ECB as it relates to bond holdings. There is no other bid. That can't continue for as long as they've done it in Japan, in Europe, and I don't know if it happens in the second half of this year, but I don't believe that investors are going to continue to put money into a market where the European Central Bank president is telling people this isn't sustainable and can't end well. I think it hits the fan in the second half of this year. Is there one thing that's going to set that off? It could be a failed bond auction. It could be, a number of things. But remember, the bond market's the most liquid, biggest market in the world. It doesn't take a lot of that capital trickling into the gold market to make a substantial difference, right? I don't think it's a coincidence that central banks around the world are finally starting to add to their holdings after years of outflows. So, that's my take. That's what I see. We'll see how it plays out. I also think it's interesting that for everybody that's out there, we record this on Friday. It's published to you on Monday. Happy International Women's Day, by the way, everybody. But there's an interview this weekend with Chairman Powell, and I thought that was interesting. It's on 60 Minutes. Anytime I see the Fed wanting to go on 60 Minutes to start explaining things to the American public, that's the setup to me. That's when I think they're going to start floating this negative interest rate question. And I think that's the introduction to the average person that's working a 9 to 5 that doesn't follow the markets, to let people know you should start getting ready for changes because it's going to look different a year from now. So I'm curious to see what the content of the interview will be. And maybe we could talk about that next week.
Yeah, me as well. I didn't know that, and it's one of the 2 or 3 TV shows I watch, so I'll actually get to see it.
We got to get you watching some more TV, Nick. Come on, man. What are the other 2? I know one.
Well, I watch Game of Thrones. It's really the only drama I watch or fictional show I watch, and to my wife's chagrin, I turn on Meet the Press normally every Sunday, and getting myself worked up, and she always asks me, why do you turn this on? And basically it's, I've kept up with the news all week. I know the topics that are going to be discussed, but I want to see, of course, the most mainstream quote unquote thought leaders and politicians, et cetera, express their views on them, just simply because Meet the Press is one of the longest running shows in television and has a large format and viewership. So I feel it sets the tone, at least in some respects. And plus, I just like to see how upset Chuck Todd gets sometimes. And if I'm being a bit rude and mean, how well they tried to cover up his receding hairline week to week.
That's hilarious. I'm sure Chuck Todd doesn't think so, but I think that's hilarious.
So now I got to go on because I read, I was on a plane this week and I read on the way back that Americans spend 4.5 hours a day watching television. And I just can't imagine how anyone can find the time to take in 4.5 hours a day of television. And that's it on that topic. But then also baldness, I was reading recently. And then we can get back to
It's a
real
hell of a
stuff.
transition. TV to
I know.
baldness.
Well, we were talking about the receding hairline.
Right.
So there was like this marketing company who did a study trying to figure out and correlate the level of how far your hairline had receded um, and relative to how much you would pay to get that hairline back. So they surveyed a bunch of balding men with various stages of baldness and attached price tags to how much hair they could get back. And we'll obviously have to find the link and put it up. But I think, if I recall correctly, it was ultimately that a full head of hair, was worth something like $32,000 or $35,000. So I
Holy
don't know,
smokes.
useless information and polls that people do, but there you go.
Interesting. Interesting. Let's bring it back to the markets. You mentioned PDAC. Any news that stood out other than, the whole Newmont Barrick Gold Corp three-way that's going on over there? Anything that stood out to you?
Well, it was a rough week if you looked at a couple of news items or rumors, if you want to have it. One, there was a rumor that Van Eck was getting out of the junior exploration space. And then I had seen a chart that there was massive outflows from precious metals ETFs. And so that sort of kind of had a drag on the sector. And so, independent of the news, companies were struggling to get a foothold. And I hate to sound like a fanboy, but someone that broke out to new highs was Atlantic Gold on the back of their year-end financials and MD&A that showed their mine is operating above spec at incredibly low cost, all-in sustaining below 600 dollars an ounce US, and the mine is going to get bigger. So that was some news that stood out to me. It like I said, broke out to new highs, and so yeah, that was the one item I saw. Yeah.
In a tough market, by the way, and you deserve kudos. We don't do the shameless plug thing, but I'll do one here because it's deserved. But can you tell people how much you're up on that and how much subscribers are up?
Well, that's funny. I was actually looking today if we could sell again for another 100% gain yet. And I think in a couple more cents, we'll be able to do that. We're in right now and again, I look today, so the numbers in my head, we're in right now at a dollar 18. And so what's that, 236 we need to get to? I think the stock hit 230 today. And that's to double our money for a second time. So yeah, we already doubled our money once, sold half, bought it back. Back at an average cost of a dollar 18, and we're almost up again, double on that. So yeah, it's been pretty good.
And what's the name of that publication where you picked the Atlantic Gold stock?
Oh, we're plugging. It's called
Absolutely.
Wall Street. It's Wall Street's Underground Profits.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, and that's in a brutal bear market, everybody, and that's far from a one-off. So back to market. So you were talking about gold outflows, Van Eck. Thoughts there? Is there an opportunity? Are we going to have the typical post PDAX sell-off that typically happens? Where do you
We
see
had a
it?
concur. We had a concurrent PDEX sell-off. I mean, Midas Gold was just at a dollar a couple weeks ago, and it's back down to low 80 cents. So, and I don't know about the Van Eck thing because then there was an article. Actually, it might have been Reuters or AP who interviewed him, and then I think I read it on Kitco had picked it up that it was like Joe Foster dispels rumors that Van Eck is getting out of. And for those who don't know, Joe Foster manages the Van Eck funds, the GDX and the GDXJ. But he was saying that no, we're not getting, or at least the headline said, and this is sort of the point I want to make. The headline said Joe Foster dispels rumors that Van Eck is getting out of junior exploration, and the wording is important here. Junior exploration stocks, because that's what the rumor was. But if you read all his direct quotes from the interview, he doesn't mention anything or dispel anything about getting out of exploration stocks. What he says is we continue to support junior development stocks, which is a different group of stocks. If you know the granular details about the market, is something who's an explorer is looking for something, doesn't have a deposit or an asset yet, and someone who's a developer has an asset and is developing that in some capacity towards tying economics to it, or permitting it, et cetera. And so someone like Joe Foster clearly knows that, and for him not to outright say, I support junior exploration when he knows that's what the rumor is. It seems to me that he didn't quite go 100% into saying we're not selling exploration stocks. I hope I made some sense.
Absolutely. And just to clear that up, Kitco had an article where Joe Foster is quoted in a report Tuesday saying that the firm remains committed to investing in the junior explorer sector. So he was specific on that front. We'll put up a link. And he says, in this market, we expect our patience to pay off once investors return to the junior sector. So, yeah, we know it's a tough market. Any of us that invest our speculative capital in this space and recommend and provide research on companies in the space know it's been tough. What I can tell people, the advice that I would give is continue to average down in the better names. I mean, the bottom line is there's just some absolute bargains. It'll turn. You'll be happy you have the position. Don't bet the ranch all on one company, but spread it out and add a little bit every month, because when it turns, it'll be worth it. It's as tough as I've seen it in, 11, 12 years that I've been dabbling in the space. So any thoughts on that?
No, it continues to be down, and I'm down 50, 60% on some positions. And if you talk to people who've made a lot of money in the space when the cycle turns, I'm talking tens of millions of dollars or more, they'll tell you that that's the way it is preceding some of those violent turns upward, that some of their biggest gains came from stocks that were down 50% more. And, you tell that to an institutional fund manager who's never dabbled in resource stocks, or you tell that to a retail investor who's only invested in mainstream stocks, and that's sort of a heart stopper, right? They need some defibrillation, but a 50% swing really in a junior mining stock is inherent volatility. I mean, that's something that's just expected in the sector. I mean, think about some of the stocks that you and I cover and have done private placements in, that, the private placements and the stock's trading at 8 cents or 10 cents or 15 cents. So, I mean, just think about that. A 20-cent stock, 50% volatility is 10 cents. So it's all about context, and you have to know that going in. And, one of the things we say all the time is when those violent move upwards do come, the bulk of the gains are captured early. I feel like a broken record when I say this, but it's an important point, and one that maybe new readers or listeners haven't heard. If you've seen the past gains teased, or you've read about past bull markets and resources where there were gains of 10,000% and 50,000% or whatever, the bulk of those gains come early on because some of the stocks and the valuations are so low. We're talking about $5 or $10 million companies, that those early doubles and multiples develop early when the stock goes from a 10 to a 20 million market cap to a 40 million market cap, because, I mean, just by the laws of math, it's diminishing returns. After that, it's harder and harder to double as they get larger. And so you have to be in when the sector turns, drinking upstream from the herd, as it were.
To quote one Mr. James Dines, well said,
That's
Nick.
right.
Well said. What else is on the agenda? What do you got going on, Nick?
Well, I'm not sure if we talked about student loan delinquencies last year, but there's sort of just this interesting, I don't know, I don't want to call it a dichotomy because there's more than two things, but all these different, call it currents in the market, where on one hand, we're adding all kinds of crazy jobs and wages are starting to go up. But on the other hand, you can sort of see the credit cycle getting long in the tooth, where we have now reached record delinquent student loans. And another thing I thought was interesting is how the Fed sort of calculates it. So there was an article out last week that says 166, I think was the number, $1 billion in student loans are now delinquent. But the Federal Reserve Bank of New York says, well, the calculation's kind of bullshit and you have to double the number. Yep. So it's really like 300 and some billion dollars of student loans that are delinquent. And so it just says to me that not everything is all gravy if that many people are delinquent in their student loans. And it ties back to things that we might have discussed here before, things that we've written about, like predatory student loans, where these people are paying to go to mechanic school or beauty salon school and taking out loans for that because the government allowed it. And certainly you're not going to get a job to pay back the amount of debt that you've incurred to get a job in that sector that's not exactly one of the highest paying. And so I don't know. I just think that's sort of the backdrop and some of those things that you need to keep in mind as you assess the broader markets, is that the debts are starting to mount up. I think I saw another thing today that was like since 2009, the U.S. debt has doubled from 11 to 22 trillion, and then you have all these people talking about modern monetary theory and that debt doesn't matter, and I just don't think that's real. That's all.
Well,
cautious.
The people that are printing the dollars don't even think it's real, right? To go back to my Mario Draghi quote earlier in the podcast, it's going to be spectacular when this thing blows up, everybody. Again, I don't know if that happens in the second half of this year or early next year, but we're getting there. It's getting closer. And just have a little gold, have some exposure to the juniors. I know we're talking our own book. Spread it out, diversify. I tend to be more on the high risk end. I tend to fall in love with the explorers. I don't mind being down 50 and 60% if I understand that there's a chance of me making, 6, 7, 800% on my speculation. I have a timeline that's well defined. I encourage everybody to do it that way. But yeah, I agree with you. We talked about accountability last week on the podcast, and this goes back to that. This goes back about how policy affects everybody. Whether you're aware or not. The Democrats handed the student loans and basically subsidized them for years on end. And we talked about being more libertarian than anything else. If you want to blame the Dems on that, they deserve the blame. I believe they're the ones that passed the legislation to go ahead and allow, all of these students that are looking for a better future, for upward mobility, to be able to take out these crazy loans, pushing up costs. And again, the only people that won were the bankers, right?
Always.
Paul Manafort went to jail.
Yeah, and he might get more time, but I didn't get a chance to really read in depth, so enlighten me.
So the recommendation was that for selling out his country and committing fraud, he faced up to 24 years in prison under federal sentencing guidelines for bank and tax fraud. And the judge said he thought that would be excessive. And so what he did is he sentenced him to 47 months in prison, which obviously is a whole heck of a lot less than 24 years. The sentencing range that was recommended was between 19 and 24 years. I believe this, again, I don't care what party you're from, I believe this, again, speaks to the disproportionate application of the law in America. The bottom line being, if you are connected and well off, you can do almost anything. And, the part that pisses me off is there's a gentleman by the name of Fate Vincent Winslow, and I'll put a link up to this. He's doing life for selling $20 worth of marijuana to an undercover cop. He sold the $20 worth of marijuana because he wanted the $5 commission. I mean, come on, America. Help me out here, Nick. I mean, because I could go on forever on this thing. There has to be a way, regardless of political affiliation, for common sense to start trickling into our justice system. This is actually something, ironically enough, that Donald Trump has helped advance. It's one of the things that he's done well, I believe. He's brought attention to it. Thoughts on that, Nick?
I think term limits and the ability for corporations to donate as much as they want to politicians, if some reins were put back on those two things, it would go a long way, because you have career politicians coming in who just perpetuate the revolving door cycle, and then you have the wolves regulating the industries that shouldn't be regulated by the wolves. Whether that's the FTC having someone from communications or cable or telephone company running it, on down the line to banking oversight committees and things like that, having former bankers on them, and we can put up revolving door links. There's a ton of them. I mean, the cycle just goes back and forth. You shouldn't be able to get rich going into government, and you certainly shouldn't be able to stay in the House and Senate for an eternity. I don't know if we've talked about how this whole thing was originally laid out in the 1700s yet on this podcast, or if I'm preaching to the choir here, but it was supposed to be a burden to go to Congress or Senate to serve your country, because the profit was in the farming. Now, albeit that's because it was high margin, because they owned slaves, and that's a whole nother discussion. But the point I'm trying to make is that you weren't supposed to want to go to Washington to craft laws to guide your country. It was supposed to be a burden. And so only people who really had the best interest of the country at heart would go do it. Otherwise, they would just stay on their farm or in their mercantile factory or whatever it was, and profit that way. And now it's completely inverse to that, where you can go into the House without ever having had a real job before, and come out rich, or stay there forever and get rich, either by trading stocks or speaking fees or writing books or the connections you make. And so that just is really the cancer that affects everything and just has continued to metastasize over the past couple of decades. And then you have, the branches of government that just perpetuate that cycle, like Supreme Court decisions that say that corporations are people and can donate amounts of money that just continue to perpetuate the cycle. And that's why you say one of the ways to combat it is to get a lobbyist. One of the real ways to combat it is to impose term limits and overturn the decision where corporations are people. And to speak to the two-tier justice system, well, that's been the way it is for a long time too. I mean, we don't have to go back too far, just to 2008, where you had banks get a slap on the wrist for some of the things that they were doing. And it's just, they know that's the way it is. It's what should be for them really staunch regulations that impact their business or shut them down or put them in handcuffs, literally and figuratively, handcuffs of the executives and handcuffing their business so they can't do the things that they did to crash the economy in the first place. And we didn't see any of that happen. We bailed them out. We gave them slaps on the wrist, and so they know that breaking the law is just a cost of doing business. It's a speeding ticket. They can speed 10 times and they only have to pay speeding ticket for one of those times. And it's just built in sort of to the way they do business, and that's sad.
Yeah, and let's pivot in a somewhat related way. I believe that more and more everyday Americans and people all around the world, but let's keep it in the US for now. I believe that people are becoming more aware that the politicians really aren't on their side. And I think that's given birth to personalities like Mr. Trump and AOC, Miss Ocasio-Cortez. She had, and again, I'll put a link up. She's a master of media, a lot like President Trump. Another YouTube video where she was grilling a member about why Mr. Trump declared a national emergency on the wall and immediately found a way to use executive power to begin to fund it and divert funds from other things to begin to build this thing. And why what I think everybody would agree is probably a more important war and national emergency, the war on opioids. She got up there and basically asked, hey, how much money do we have in the account to tackle this national emergency declared by our president? And the answer was $57,000, Nick.
Jesus.
There's $57,000 in an account to address the national emergency that is opioid addiction in this country. And she asked, well, how much has been spent? And they basically said nothing has been spent. And so, again, the parties don't really care about you people. It's all a dog and pony show. I will say...
Let me take it to the next level. Let me take it to the next level, because just this week you have or last week it might have been, you have the Strickland family who controlled the company that was pushing OxyContin, who's declaring for bankruptcy, but has made, multiple tens or hundreds of $1 million over and over again, crying, woe is me, when it's a known fact that they were the ones pushing this drugs and paying doctors and just doing whatever they could at all costs to push this drug on the country that kicked off this epidemic to begin with. And now they're, going to try to get out scot-free by declaring bankruptcy. And who's going to let them? I mean, the government's going to let them. Why? Because they probably donated to a bunch of, and I won't say probably, I mean, I put a link up. They donate to the politicians' campaigns. So that's the cycle right there.
And actually, AOC was very clear about making that connection. She said, could it be that there's more of a priority to get funding for the wall in order because of the many lobbyists that are here every day pushing for, laws that encourage detaining people and putting them in private prisons, and then they're, profiting on the back end of it. So again, she did a good job of outlining that. On a quick note, she also introduced into the record an article that I'll put a link up to by a young journalist for the New York Times by the name of Jose Del Real. She actually held the article up and said, this is the destruction that's happening in the Bronx where I come from. And she submitted the article on the record, which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, it's ugly stuff out there, everybody. And we got to get really clear as a country about who's doing what. And I disagree with a lot of AOC's policy approaches, but I will say I am impressed with the substance of discussions that she has. And hopefully, the policy pivots as she matures, but I hope the substance in the dialogue that she's encouraging does it, because it's good. It's important.
Agree. And congrats to Jose.
Go, Jose. You still got a job despite most of the media getting laid off. Oh, feel good stories, Nick. There's a petition to sell Montana to Canada for $1 trillion. I don't know why that makes me feel good, but it makes me laugh. It makes me smile. I had somebody ask me the other day, why do you do the podcast? You get like 30, 40 views right now, right? We just started it. And I said, well, it's cheaper than therapy. I get to talk with Nick for an hour and we get to run our mouth about whatever the hell we want to run our mouth about. But yeah, there was a petition started, a change.org petition that proposes selling Montana to Canada for $1 trillion to pay off the national debt. The petition reads, we have too much debt and Montana is useless. Just tell them it has beavers or something. I thought that was great. What do you think? You think it's a good deal, Nick?
Well, is there high demand for beavers in Canada?
I don't know where the just tell them it has beavers or something comes from, but yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Have they run this by the people, the good folks in Montana?
A lot of the people that actually have signed on, it's I think it's got something close to like 10,000 signatures last I checked, are from Montana.
So that's the more interesting thing to me. So I hadn't heard that. The question then is, why does Montana want to sell itself to Canada?
To pay off the national debt.
But then it would, but then it wouldn't be their debt anymore. So what they just want to, it look, what they want to bail out the United States and escape to Canada? That doesn't make sense to me. This just sounds like, I don't know, fake news or a media sham because, the people in Montana that I know are red-blooded, gun-toting, American-loving, we ain't going to Canada, come make me kind of people. So,
And we got a bunker.
yeah, that's right. So very, very interesting to me
Yeah.
why people from Montana would sign this. It just sounds like an internet troll thing to me.
Yeah, you know what the funniest internet troll of the week was to me?
Well, so what's that?
The one where they had Cleopatra looking just like Britney Spears and all the fake outrage people immediately got on their Twitter. Did you read that?
I saw, no, I didn't read it, but I saw. So was it fake or was it real?
Oh no, it was absolutely fake. Somebody decided to put up a picture from the game Britney's Dance Beat, right? And they put up a picture and said scientists at Harvard University have created this 3D model depicting what ancient Egyptian queen Cleopatra may have looked like. And of course, immediately, man, I mean, nobody even stopped to vet it or check and see if it was factual or not. I don't know how people missed it, but, you had one gentleman that said, and again, we'll put a link up, she wouldn't have blonde hair. She was a mix of Greek and Egyptian, so hair would be brown or black in color, as would the eyes. Another person put up there, Cleopatra wasn't white, dumbass. Stop whitewashing history. Just because the church destroyed and hid the history and culture of Europe doesn't mean we get to pick and choose from other cultures. It means we have to research and demand our hidden history back from the church and government. So while I don't disagree with the last part of that statement, I thought it was interesting that the person that tweeted this started by saying, why don't you go research?
Jesus.
So that
I'm
was the
gonna
best
go
troll
for
of the week. That one was hilarious to me. I got a kick out of it.
I'm gonna go for a little bit on this one because you know me and the fake outrage is getting absolutely ridiculous. So I can only imagine the vitriol spewed by people after reading that someone was trying to whitewash Cleopatra. And now I'm going to talk about one that was a little bit more real, actually two that were a little bit more real, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the media. Two I saw this week were this. One, apparently there's a movie going to be made about the Williams sisters, the tennis stars, Venus and Serena. And they have cast Will Smith to play their father. And I see trending one day people outraged because Will Smith has been cast to play the Williams sisters' father. And so, me being me, I clicked. My wife tells me I shouldn't click, but I clicked. Why on earth are these people outraged because Will Smith is cast to be the father? And the reason is because Serena Williams' father was darker complected than Will Smith, and so they should have cast a more dark complected actor to portray the father because they're whitewashing the Williams family. So thoughts on that in a second. The second one I saw was this company is selling water in the shape of a 40 glass. So, a 40 glass that you drank when you were in high school, 40 a beer, 40 ounces of beer, malt liquor, King Cobra, Colt 45, Steel Reserve, whatever it is. This company is selling water in jars that are shaped in that way. It's 40 ounces of water because they want you to drink two of them a day to stay healthy. They want you to drink 80 ounces of water a day. And I think it's a clever marketing gimmick.
Absolutely.
But apparently, and again, quotes, unquotes, the black community is outraged because of the long and tenuous history that they apparently have with malt liquor and its cheap price and high liquor content and how it was marketed to them through rappers that so it went on to perpetuate the oppression of the black community. So by selling water in the same shaped container, that's wrong.
The fuck is wrong with people? First off, nobody's cornering the market on 40 ounces. Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, all right. So my wife was like, "Well, who says they're outraged?" And I was saying, "Well, I think it was like New York Daily News." And granted, I get that. I've seen the statistics that like all this vitriol. One I saw this week was like they help some company quantified how many negative tweets there's been about Princess Meghan Markle or whatever her official title is, and they distilled that. All these negative tweets and online posts that were coming from about Meghan Markle were coming from like 20 accounts, right? It's like Pareto's principle, the 80-20 rule. Like 80% of the results come from 20% of the people.
Yep.
And so I have to scratch my head and say, how many people are really outraged that the water's in a 40? Was it one that got interviewed, then that got posted, and people like me then click it because they want to read because it gets their blood boiling, and is that what propagates it? So I think I'm just gonna like stop clicking on the thing because I can't imagine there was more than one person outraged about this thing, and it just gets the whole online Twitter sphere, blogosphere into a frenzy, and it's not good for anything. And now I'm just going to keep going because there was this blog this week.
Worked, Nick. It worked. It's got you pissed off.
I know, right? That quantified the happiness of the internet. So they came up with 2,000 words that indicated how the internet was feeling based on social media posts and things, whether the internet was feeling happy or sad or mad. And they correlated it, every single day, going back for a while, actually, to like 2014 or 2015. And like some of the happiest days were, let me see if I can think of these, like the royal wedding when the Cubs won the World Series.
I can vouch for that one.
There you go, right? The Ellen DeGeneres Twitter selfie was one of the happiest days. The days the Supreme Court legalized gay marriage was one of the happiest days. And then there were some not so happy days like mass shooting days, the day George Zimmerman was found not guilty or held unaccountable for murdering Trayvon Martin, the protest in Missouri, things like that. So, and it's just interesting to me how you can gauge the whole sort of, I don't know, psyche of the nation by just monitoring 2,000 words online. And then I think about how far the media can go to sway that, right? By putting out an article about a bottle of water being sold in a 40 container, about, two people being outraged about Will Smith being cast. And so you have to wonder the outrage that comes from the populace about the news and how much of it is justified. And then I'll end this with just a funny meme I saw. It was a guy throwing dildos at a blackboard. And
what color dildos, Nick? What color dildos?
They were purple. They were
that's
large.
Neutral. That's
neutral. They were large purple ones. But it was an example of how some media outlets like Vice and BuzzFeed write articles. And so on one blackboard, it was poor countries like Venezuela and Guatemala and I don't know, Cambodia, whatever. And so he would throw the dildo at the blackboard in whichever country it stuck to. So that was the country they were going to write about. And on the next one, the next blackboard was hard drugs. So it was like ketamine and crack and cocaine. And so he throws the dildo at the blackboard and it hits ketamine. And so the next billboard is like sexualities and genders. So it's like, transgender, whatever.
All the hot words.
Right, straight, bi, homosexual, all the genders that I can't think of, and he throws the dildo and it hits transgender. So the article is going to be about Venezuela's transgender ketamine dealers.
We
And
should,
it just seems, I think that's how it goes. It's like 40 bottle filled with water in Brooklyn. Let's do it.
we should start a newsletter where we pick stocks by putting the names of stocks on a blackboard and then throw dildos at it and then compare it to our actual performance and see how it does.
That's really funny. You want to hear one more thing that's not funny? I have heard of psychopath mining CEOs who have dartboards with newsletter writers on them who throw darts at the newsletter writers who don't write about their companies or write badly about their companies.
That's all right. This is America. We all got guns. Throw your darts.
Uh, Especially in Montana, so watch out, Canadians.
There you go. There you go. Be careful with those darts hit.
Oh, God, that was fun. What's next?
All right, that got you all riled up. What makes you smile, Nick? Is it any good news out there that made you smile? I know you had one story you wanted to touch on, which obviously brought a smile to my face as well. I think it's important.
Yes, second person cured from AIDS is really important. So there was one a while ago, I forget how many years ago, cured from HIV, excuse me, the virus that causes AIDS. And it's been done by a bone marrow transplant, which gives the person suffering from HIV a bunch of new cells. Think of them as soldiers, white blood cells, to go fight the battle with HIV. And so now the second person has been presumably, they can never say for sure if it's going to be 100% remission, but it hasn't come back. Has been cured from HIV, and so obviously historic, obviously fantastic, obviously a step in the right direction. And then I'm going to throw the caveat at you. Bone marrow transplants are tough. I mean, they're tough for the donor. They're tough for the recipient. It's a difficult surgery. It's a painful surgery. And so, for as good as it is, not quite sure it's the measure that's going to be the end all be all cure for everyone suffering with HIV, but coupling the progress that's been made with the bone marrow transplants with the advancements that are being made in um, immuno research and antibody research and things like that, hopefully can accelerate the path to a real cure based on the cells themselves without having to have everyone go through a bone marrow transplant. So, positive story of the week.
That's good stuff. You want to know what made me smile and made my recent travels a whole lot more pleasant?
What was it?
New music by a gentleman from here, from Austin, actually, by the name of Gary Clark Jr. For those of you that don't know who Gary Clark Jr. is, he is absolutely brilliant. The music is country, rock, jazz, and blues infused, and I don't know if there's anybody that plays a guitar as well as that gentleman right now. He's an absolute beast. Everybody should go take a listen. The album is called This Land. Incredible, incredible, incredible body of work. So that made me smile. That made me happy.
Good. Link up. I'll have to check it out.
Link will be up, everybody. Stock of the week, Nick. You got one this week?
Yeah, I didn't think about it too long and hard, but I thought about sort of some conversations I've had with people recently and some things I know are working through um, various places in the government, and I came up with Azarga Uranium. They own one of the best, if not the best, undeveloped in situ recovery. That's ISR project, uranium project in the United States that's currently working its way through permitting and is quite cheap, something like, I don't know, 23 or 24 cents Canadian. And there's a couple of things working in the background. I'm not mentioning this because they had a press release this week or anything, but really two things. One, early in February, they had a press release where, and an appeals court had remanded a decision back to the NRC, and I had to pull out my dictionary and look up remanded because I didn't know what that meant. And
I
then I learned
unfortunately do.
I had to. That's funny. Then I had to. So I learned that the appeals court sent it back. That's what remand means. They sent it back to the NRC to let the NRC make the decision on what the appeals court was asked to make a decision on. And so, as a result of that, the NRC upheld Azarga's license, their contention to this, or their license to this project. And now there's just a remaining contention that has to be resolved with a tribe, and this is in the Black Hills area of South Dakota. It's the Sioux, I believe it is. And once that last contention is resolved, this thing can then progress. So the way that and the contention is this, and this is nutshell. I'm not a lawyer, so please, totally nutshell. They have to, or they want to see that there's nothing of significant importance to their tribe, their ancestry, their culture, etc., on the land where Azarga is trying to develop this project. So, old huts or villages or burial grounds or artifacts or something like that. And the way this is resolved is Azarga takes them out to site, allows them to look around, and then they're allowed to have their say. And as I understand it, this has been used, this site tour idea in the past to resolve these types of contentions successfully. Being that, they bring the tribe out, the tribe gets to see it with their own eyes, and say, yep, all good, nothing here that, is important to our ancestors or our way of life. And so we appreciate you allowing us to come out and see, and then they sign on the line. And two would be that also, as I understand it, there should be nothing of importance or contentious to this tribe. So things should be all good. This is expected to be, somewhere around the April, May, June timeline. So there should be news coming soon. Congruently with that, and that's important.
Yes.
Is there's this Section 232 thing working its way through the Commerce Department, which is basically the U.S. Uranium industry saying, hey, you guys have 100 nuclear reactors and we are only currently producing enough uranium for one or maybe even less than one of those uranium reactors. You might want to do something about that because the other uranium's coming from not so nice places and people who don't really like you. And so Commerce has been investigating that under Wilbur Ross for the past couple of months. They did something similar with steel. You'll recall they did something similar with aluminum. You'll recall, and then once Commerce gets the report out, then the president has I think something like 90 days or 3 months to act on it. Rumors have now begun to swirl that we're going to get the Commerce Department's report, not the decision from the president, but the initial report sometime in the middle of April. So, and if you base the outcome, or you think the outcome is going to align with what had happened for steel and aluminum and the rhetoric coming out of the Trump administration and his appointees, you have to think it's going to be something beneficial for the U.S. uranium industry, either in the form of a tariff or a price floor, or a tariff that creates a price floor, or a quota or something. We don't know what it's going to be, but and that would be hugely beneficial to the U.S. uranium industry and the companies that operate within it, of which there are few. So Azarga, controlling one of the best undeveloped assets, being so cheap in the market right now on a valuation standpoint, and also having the secondary catalyst of the rectification of the contention on its permit, being long-winded, I know, then you have two potential catalysts there that could go very well for Azarga in the near term.
Market cap approximately 38 million. I'm familiar. I'm a shareholder. I'm biased. I like them.
As am I.
Yep. Like the asset, you should assume we're biased in every stock we talk up, because if not, we wouldn't be talking it up and we wouldn't own it in most cases. So, yeah, I agree. I think Azarga is a heck of a speculation. And, if one of those two or three catalysts materialize in the next 3 months, I think it's off to the races. If they all happen to coincide time-wise with each other, then I think we're off to the races, but with a lot more runway. So that should be fun. Company I want to talk about this week, Advantage Lithium. Advantage Lithium drilled last year, published a resource. The resource they had published was approximately 3 million tons. This is actually not even last year. Well, it was last year, May of 2018. They have now managed to double that resource across all categories. The measured and indicated category is 4.8 million tons, 1.5 million tons inferred. Market cap approximately 97 million. If you do the math with some of the most recent acquisitions, you could argue the stock should be trading north of $2 per share. It currently trades at approximately 59 cents Canadian. Interesting company. It's right next to major producing companies. It's now the second largest undeveloped lithium project in Argentina, and I believe it is a prime takeout target. Advantage Lithium.
25% already owned by the neighboring major producer. Can I do you? Oro Cobre.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well done,
so
sir.
already a quarter done right there. And so obviously having the guidance of someone who's done it before in a nearby salar, it's sort of the writing is kind of on the wall there.
I've been to the project. It's a fractured real estate situation there where you have, two major producers that with a partner that are producing. Advantage Lithium's asset falls right in between each of those. So again, when I say prime takeout target, it's not hype based on what I hope will happen. It's hype based on the fact that they cannot continue to pump around this asset without affecting and depleting it. So the easiest thing to do would be to buy it out and feed the production pipeline, obviously. So Advantage Lithium, Azarga Uranium, 2 stock picks of the week.
Like it.
Wonderful. What do we got, Nick? Is that it?
That's it. Heading into the weekend. As you said, we record these on Friday, put them out on Monday. So that's it. Getting ready to do it.
I like it. Have a great week, everybody. Episode 9, Bizarro World. Nick, thank you, sir.
Thank you.